Hello and welcome to Compliance Thursdays. My name is Steve Dodds. Today we're going to be talking about the Patriot Act and what it requires when it comes to the Office of Foreign Asset Control's Specially Designated Nationals list. So that is a mouthful. Moving forward, I'm going to refer to that as the OFAC list or the OFAC Requirements. This is what it's most commonly known as when you start talking about compliance. So the Patriot Act, and everybody probably knows, in 2011, September 11th, we were attacked. Our government responded in a couple different ways. One of the ways they responded was by coming out with this Patriot Act. So the Patriot Act did a number of different things. It allowed our police and rescue to communicate more effectively. It also put some things into place that allow our government basically to keep tabs on possible terrorist activity within our borders. And it also required American businesses to start checking the OFAC list. Well, I shouldn't say start checking the OFAC list. That requirement was in place already. What they are really putting a focus on is you can't sell to somebody on the list. The thing about that is that there's no way to know if somebody's on the list unless you check the list. So that's where our best recommendation is that you check the list with every sale, and there are a couple other parameters which I'll go through in the videos I'm going to play for you here in just a few minutes. So what I'm going to do is take you over to our compliance certification program. If you've been on one of these before, the certification program is totally online. You can get more information if you want to get certified at Wheelhouse College. If somebody on staff there is not certified as a compliance manager, they need to be. There are a couple different ways you can do it. We offer a way to get them certified here online. It's all handled within your dealership. If you're interested, you can subscribe here. Or you can go to the pullout here. It'll give you some more information. If you have any specific questions, feel free to email me at steve@garagecomposites or compliance@garagecomposites.com, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So I'm going to take you over to our portal. I've already logged in, went to section 4, which is where this information is. Video 6. I'm going to go ahead and play this for you, and I'll be back with you in just a moment. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Controls, and basically they have what they call their Specially Designated Nationals list. And as an American citizen, you cannot sell to someone on that list. So the list consists of a lot of different things. It consists of course, we think of terrorists, money launderers. There are also, anytime the U.S. puts sanctions on, say, a country or an organization, like when Russia invaded the Ukraine, we put a bunch of sanctions against Russia, and those companies, those people that were involved, they would all be put on that list also. So it has to do with national security and really who we should be doing business with as Americans. So there are 2 requirements. The first one is that you have 2 forms of ID on every customer. So a state or federal issued picture ID is the first, so like a driver's license or a passport. The second form of ID can be anything with a name and an expiration date. So it could be a Costco card, it could be a fishing and hunting license, it could be a concealed weapons permit. Anything with a name and an expiration. Actually, if you're selling street bikes primarily, you actually are probably already getting 2 forms of ID because your insurance card has a name and an expiration date on it. The second requirement is that you check the OFAC list. So that list can be checked for free at instantofac.com, or you can check it in conjunction with your credit bureau. A lot of people, if they're going through 700 credit, or you're going directly through one of the credit bureaus like Equifax or TransUnion or Experian, you can automatically be checking it that way. So that piece is covered, but you also need to make sure that you're checking it on your cash deals. And that's where the instant OFAC website comes in. It makes it nice and easy for you, cheap, it's quick, and it just needs to be done prior to selling any vehicle to a customer. Now, the law doesn't require that you check the list. What the law requires is that you don't sell to those people. So you're never going to have somebody come in and want to audit your people you've checked. It's just that, without checking the list, there's no way for me to know who's on it and who's not. The way the law is written, every single transaction through your business needs to be checked on the OFAC. So if somebody comes in and they want to give you cash and they want to buy 4 spark plugs, technically you should ask for 2 forms of ID and you should go check the OFAC list before you sell it to them. Most dealerships are not applying it that way though. They're actually setting parameters. They're checking major units. They're checking certain transactions that are over, say, a certain dollar amount or that seem suspicious in the parts and service department. A good example of something that would be suspicious is if you got a order and you were supposed to ship 50 GoPros overseas. That might be a transaction you'd want to check, run that customer through the OFAC and make sure you weren't shipping to somebody you shouldn't be shipping to. So if you think you have a hit, first thing you want to do is stop the sale, temporarily at least, and figure out if this is a false hit or a true hit. There's an 800 number you can call, and I've got it up over my shoulder here. And you basically call the number, and they'll guide you through asking you some more questions and trying to help you figure out if you have a real hit or not. So if you decide that you don't have a real hit, this is definitely not the person that you're looking for. Let's say the birth date on the person on the list is 1952, and the person that's in your dealership, at least according to their driver's license, was born in 1985, probably not going to be the same person. So at that point, you can continue on with your sale and not worry about it. But if you think after making that phone call that you really do have a hit, there are a couple things you need to do. Number one, you do not sell that vehicle to that customer. If you do sell that vehicle to the customer, there's jail time involved and it gets very serious. And we'll talk about that in depth when we get to the enforcement piece. So the second thing you need to do is report that you had a hit, a legitimate hit, to the Office of Foreign Asset Controls. And number 3 is you do not let the customer know that you had a hit. Come up with some other reason that you can't sell the vehicle, but the answer you give the customer cannot be because you're on the OFAC list. So you also need to retain the records for 5 years. So there should be a file somewhere that you keep in your office of OFAC hits that you've had. So, and now, as promised, let's talk about the enforcement piece. So if you sell to a person on the list without knowing it, the courts basically have said it's a civil penalty. So if you weren't checking it, you're looking at a big monetary fine, and this is a fine that's not necessarily just for the dealership. It can also be applied to the person who's in the chair, so the finance manager can end up with a pretty hefty fine. For things like Cuban cigars, I've seen $100, $150 fines for that. So we can only imagine that a vehicle would be a little more than that. Now, let's say you sell to someone on the list knowingly. That's where it gets pretty serious. The fine for the company would be $10 million, and the fine for the individual, and this is the person that signed their name on the contract, is $5 million and 30 years in prison. Now, they're pretty generous if you turn yourself in. You turn yourself in, they'll knock everything in half. So it's $2.5 million and 15 years in prison. My recommendation would be, whatever happens, if you have a hit on the list, you don't sell it. If you have a sales manager or general manager that's like, forget it, sell it, that's fine, they can sell it. But if I were the finance manager in that position, I would just say I'm not selling it because it's just not worth the risk that is associated with it.
Okay, so the next video is going to talk a little bit about what the reporting responsibilities are. So if you do get a hit on the OFAC list, there's a letter that you need to send in to the Office of Foreign Asset Controls to notify them you had a hit. And this is going to walk you through how to do that.
So we talked some about what to do if you have a hit on your OFAC list. And this is one of the requirements. Part of it is you have to send a letter to the Office of Foreign Asset Controls within 10 days of having a hit. Now, remember, and I want to reiterate this, make sure that every single transaction, cash, finance, or even if you've already checked the list on this customer 6 months ago, you need to check the list every single time you have a possible transaction with the customer. They don't update this list on any regular basis. It could be updated daily, it could be updated monthly, it could be updated weekly. But if the customer buys something from you and is not on the list, that does not mean they have not been added between the first transaction and the second transaction. So every single transaction, you want to check the list. So if you do have a hit, this is the sample submission report that you need to send to the OFAC. So at the top, you'll notice you can either fax or mail this report in. You'll also notice that there's room for you to put your dealership information here and the information for the person they can contact if the Office of Foreign Asset Controls has any questions. Now, this name and phone number and email address is going to be for the person who's in charge of compliance for the dealership. So it's going to be, if you're being certified as a compliance manager, then this would be your information that would go on this letter. And then directly underneath that, you'll notice, there's some transaction information, status, and then of course you want to identify the OFAC listing that stopped your transaction from happening so that the Office of Foreign Asset Controls can go back and look and verify what you're sending them. Now, as always, make sure that before you start using this sample form that you run it past your attorney. If he or she says that yes, they're confident that this meets the requirements as they interpret them, go ahead and start using it. If not, they may recommend a tweak or two, but they are the ones that will give you the actual legal guidance that you need. Now, if you have any further questions, or they do, you can always go to www.treas.gov/OFAC, and that will give you more information about the requirement. So on to Chapter 13. Thank you.
Okay, so the most important piece here is that no matter what happens, if you pull an OFAC report and it looks like the information on the OFAC report matches the customer you have, you call the 800 number, they agree that it looks like you have a match, you do not sell the vehicle. I should say you don't sell the vehicle, you don't sell the 50 GoPros, you don't sell whatever it is that customer wants to purchase. You do not sell it. That is the thing that will get you in the most trouble, and that's the situation you definitely don't want to be in. So if you think you have a hit, you don't sell the vehicle. So as always, I'm going to recommend that you guys pick up the Hudson Cook's F&I Legal Desk book. This is the reference that we use for our textbook for our certification. A lot of the information in here is not necessarily something you're going to read cover to cover. It's a reference guide. So if you have a question about a specific law, regulation, act, you can go in here and you can look up the answer. It's really it's a really good thing to have on hand if you have questions about compliance. So I would definitely pick one of those up. You can pick them up on Amazon. It's about $50. You can pick them up through their website also, same price. But please get one of those if you don't already have one. So next week we're going to talk about state laws and federal laws and how they play together, what one can say about the other, or what areas of compliance they each cover, because they each kind of have their own domain. And there is a little crossover, but I want to make sure everybody knows what to do when there is the crossover. I'm also going to give you some resources for more information when it comes to especially your state laws. State regulations are different from state to state, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be your state laws. But what that means is that where with the federal laws, we can all follow them across the board. When it comes to state laws, we really don't live in one country. We live in 50 little countries. So I want to make sure you guys know where to go for the state regulations, where to find out more information, and how to figure out what you need to do that maybe your neighbor across the state line doesn't have to do. So join me next week. Again, thank you for joining me for Compliance Thursdays. My name is Steve Dodds, and I'll see you next week.